Hello and welcome to Choose a Fi. Today on the show, we have another episode of Households of Fi. So we've had previously Zach and Marilyn on the show, and the amount of action that they took in the first year of finding Fi was remarkable. And we spoke with them in episode 247. Paula Pant was nice enough to chat with them about real estate and real estate rentals, et cetera. And that was wonderful. They've taken massive action on that. And then Jonathan and I spoke with them in episode 321 and talked mindset, talked savings rate, different savings vehicles, and getting ahead on a moderate to low income. So their story has a little bit of everything. And I'm just fascinated to see and hear the update, see what's been going on in their lives for the last year and a half. And hopefully we can kind of talk through their situation, see what wins they've had, see what issues they've had, and just see how we as a community can come together and help and be part of this. That's what the Households of Fi is all about. So with that, welcome to Choose FI.
You're listening to Choose FI Radio. The blueprint for financial independence lives here. If you're looking to unlock the secrets to financial independence and early retirement, you're in the right place. Stay tuned and join a community of like-minded people who are getting off the hamster wheel and taking control of their lives in the pursuit of financial independence. Choose FI, your home for financial independence online.
All right, Zach, welcome back to Choose FI. I'm so happy to have you here.
Yeah, thanks. Great to be back.
Yeah, this should be fun. And actually, one of the great aspects of FI is actually encapsulated in why Marilyn is not here joining us. So let us know what she's up to right now.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it'd be better. I wish she was here, but Marilyn is doing exactly what she wants to be doing right now. You know, I don't know. Hopefully folks have gone back and listened to the last episode, but she was able to quit her job because we accumulated a decent amount of what we refer to as FU money. And so she's actually volunteering in our youngest son's classroom. He's in kindergarten. And so I don't think there's anywhere else she'd rather be than volunteering in that classroom. So she's busy learning her ABCs at kindergarten. So it's you just got me today.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, we're happy to have you. And certainly the beautiful thing about us rebooting this Households of Fi is this is not a one-time thing, right? So we'll certainly hear from Marilyn in the coming months and years, hopefully, if you guys will be nice enough to join us. We'd love to have you. So yeah, that's really great. And it is amazing. Just, I guess what we've seen, Marilyn's story is amazing. Obviously, both of your story, but Marilyn was able to, and like you said, go back and listen to episode 321 because it was a beautiful illustration of that power of FU money, right? Amidst the pandemic, her office said, hey, you have to come back in. And there was no wiggle room. And she basically said, no, that's why we save money. We have the power. It has gone from, I am beholden to my job at every given moment, or my life is going to fall apart, to, we started saving money. We have a significant net worth. And because we've cut our expenses to the bone, I can do this and I can live the life that I want to live, especially when my kids are young.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been a really powerful thing to kind of take the power back, as they say. I think that's a song or something. But yeah, to feel like the ball is in our court and to make decisions based on our values versus based on, oh man, we've got to keep this job.
Yeah, I hear you. And certainly volunteering in kids' classrooms. I actually went in recently and volunteered in my daughter Molly's, her classroom. It was cool because their teacher had them do a weekly podcast. And it was like a little 90-second podcast on Friday that she sent home. And it was really great. The kids did an amazing job. And I actually know the teacher because my older daughter had her. And I reached out and said, hey, I would love to help the kids with their podcasting, with maybe some ideas on presentation, because it all is kind of part and parcel of the same thing. So yeah, I went in and chatted with them, and it was so awesome. It was like a 45-minute thing that was supposed to be 15, but the kids just kept peppering me with these super insightful questions. It was really great.
Oh, that's fantastic. That sounds like a great time.
Yeah, it really, really was. So, all right, Zach, let's, I think the easiest thing with these Households of Fi, because again, hopefully everybody goes back and listens to 321 and 247. But let's assume that they're not going to. Just kind of catch us up to speed with where you were over the first, let's say, year of your FI journey and the actions that you guys had taken up until that point.
Sure. So whenever we found financial independence, we had just graduated from the "we're in a whole lot of debt" club. We were students of Dave Ramsey, like a lot of folks that have been on the show and that kind of are involved in the FI movement, and definitely we're kind of saying to ourselves, "Oh boy, what's next?" This is great. We paid off all our debts, and it's just kind of it's almost like you hit a brick wall and say, well, now what? now I paid off all my debts. I'm celebrating. That's fantastic. But what do I do now? Am I just going to work until I die? What's the next move? So whenever we found FI, we were super pumped up about it. And we have managed to stay relatively pumped up. So we were able to kind of get our savings up, increasing the savings rate, contributing to a Roth IRA. I work for the government. I work for the state of Utah. So I have access to a 457 plan. So I was able to contribute a couple $100s to a 457, and that just built up. Also getting my employer match for my 401k and just kind of doing the little things. Brad, I remember you've said a couple times, if you can just be a little bit smarter, if you can just think about it just in a little bit of a different way to make an adjustment that's not going to change your life. It's not going to make things super difficult, but it can potentially save you huge in the long run. And that was our story. And we were able to get ahead that way. We started watching our net worth go up. Was a lot of fun. I spent a lot of time with using compound interest calculators to try and figure out how soon I could be done. And we made great progress. One of probably the biggest and coolest thing we did is we moved into this house that we're in right now. And in this house, there's a basement. And we were able to kind of move some things around and convert that basement into a basement apartment. And that basement apartment, 100%, it actually covers our mortgage. And then we get like $200-ish, depending kind of on other bills and how much things are. But to have that paid 100%, and it's been over a year now where we haven't had to pay our own mortgage, has probably been one of the most life-changing things that we've discovered through this FI journey. And I think that's about where we left you guys the last time we spoke.
Yeah, and that is just a remarkable story. And I love, I want to dial in on that that's akin to house hacking, as they call it, right? So you bought this house, and I guess my question to you, which we didn't ask last time, was the basement apartment, was it like a slam dunk that you guys were looking to rent out, like as you were purchasing, or was it like a happy accident?
No, so whenever we got on Households of FI, before we even had our first conversation with Paula, we were living in like a little duplex kind of house, and we wanted to find a place that had the opportunity to be able to do a rental. Now, when we got here, the basement was a wreck. It was totally trashed, and Marilyn and I are pretty good at getting our hands dirty and going in and doing a little bit of work. So we did some kind of finishing work down there, cleaned some things up, I think we replaced most of the bathroom, and we're able to get it rented for a pretty good fair market price.
That is cool. Did you guys have to get like additional permits? Was it already, obviously every local jurisdiction is different, so it might be more liberal where you are in terms of permitting, but was that something that you had to like dot I's and cross T's on getting it as like an approved rental, or how did that work?
So it was already zoned, even though the basement was a wreck, it was already zoned as a multiple family dwelling. The entrance was there and everything. I mean, there was a kitchen in the basement, so it had already been set up that way. Fortunately, we didn't have to jump through too many hoops with local government.
Nice. Okay, that's cool. Because yeah, it's funny because we actually have a basement in our house, and it looks like it's vaguely set up as like a potential rental. But yeah, unfortunately, I think there's some like ridiculous rule that like you can't have a second stove unless you get some type of like permit or some such. So there's literally a full kitchen except for this stove, which is so silly. But yeah, we haven't thought about renting it as of now. But I think that's something that really appeals to a lot of people in the FI community, right? Is like finding that house that, I mean, I don't think most people even aspire to do it as well as you've done it, frankly, right? Like your tenants are paying for your entire mortgage plus $100 or $200 a month. So your living expenses are entirely free.
No, it's been fantastic. And we can understand, I've heard people say, hey, I'm not going to do a house hack. It's kind of invasive. They're under our same roof. They live in our house. So we try to be picky. about the people that we let live in our house. I mean, we don't really interact with them. They've got their own entrance and that sort of thing, but take the biggest line item in your budget. For us, that's our mortgage. I'd say for most people, that's their rent or their mortgage, and just completely wipe it out and imagine the amount of cash flow you're going to start to get when you just take, $1,000, $2,000, depending on where you're at, and just make it, snap your fingers, it's gone. I mean, that was pretty magical for us.
Yeah, that is incredibly magical. And yeah, we talked about, and I think one of the more insightful things we talked about in episode 321 was, I think a lot of people hear about FI and people living for $30,000 or $40,000 a year, and it sounds awful. But we reframed it as, okay, you guys have essentially cut out about $30,000 a year of expenses out of your life by having no car payments, getting your living expenses for free, and just being smart at the margins, right? And that's about $30K. Your life otherwise costs somewhere in the $35,000, $40,000, or at least it was a year and a half ago. So, I mean, we're talking like $70,000, and that's after tax money. So when you gross that up for pre-tax, that's a $90,000 plus income, right? And you're only spending out of pocket $35,000 to $40,000. So like that's a really great illustration. I think there's no better illustration of how being intentional about this can make it so that you can live a $90,000 or $100,000 lifestyle for $35,000, right?
Yeah, our life still at this moment costs about $30,000 a year. And we don't make a ton of money. And that was one of the big things. We look at some of the other folks that have we go on the Facebook group and talk to people. And it seems like, this is kind of the stigma of FI, is you either got to be, an engineer or somebody who can work remotely, or some, like IT guy. There's these kinds of jobs where they're high income earners. They're earning, over $100,000 plus a year. And that's not us. We're hanging out right in the $40,000 to $50,000 range. And so some would say, hey, I guess FI is not for you. And we kind of pushed back against that and said, no, we're going to find a way. And house hacking has it has been the biggest way that we've been able to make some great progress.
Yeah. And I love that you didn't take that ridiculous nonsense, like that roadblock, for truth, because it isn't true. It's such a preposterous caricature at this point of the FI community that, I mean, it's like circa 2013, and it hasn't been updated that, oh, you have to be a single white man in your 30s in a tech job to pursue FI. Like, sometimes I don't understand when, not to pat ourselves on the back here at Choose a FI, but like, we've had 600 episodes and 50 million downloads, right? Like, we have 300 Choose a FI local groups across the world. Like, this has become the narrative, but yet I think people love to throw up their hands and say, oh, it's some other they. We couldn't possibly do this. That's just reserved for somebody else. And you guys, to your great credit, have said, no, we can do this. Not only can we do this, but Marilyn could stop working, right? And you could make $40,000 to $50,000 a year. And because you're intentional and smart, you can still save a boatload of money and pursue FI. So I absolutely love that. And thanks for really updating us on kind of, okay, that's where we were. But right, Zach, that was almost 2 years ago, year and a half to 20 months, something like that, when we actually recorded the last episode. So naturally, things have happened in the intervening time, good, bad, or indifferent. And I'd love to hear kind of just like a little update, and we'll obviously stop and slow down on the major issues.
Yeah, it kind of seems like one of the, I don't know one of the kind of phrases of Choose FI. There's a handful of them, but one of them is life is lumpy, and things don't always go exactly perfect. And I'm sitting here talking about ourselves like we're, this slam dunk. We've done such a great job. Look at us, we're fantastic, and we haven't been. We haven't been totally fantastic. So here's my opportunity to share some of the bumps and lumps of life.
Yeah.
There's a phrase that was used early on in the podcast. It probably comes up from time to time now, lifestyle creep. So whenever that $1,000 came at me, the additional, $1,100, $1,200 with when we got the house hack, right? When we recorded the last podcast, we had just got renters. It was a brand new thing for us. Now we've lived like that for over a year. And when we first got it, I had dollar signs in my eyes. I felt like Scrooge McDuck, who could go, swimming in his pool of money.
Nice.
And it was really tempting to say, okay, we have arrived. We're rich now. And of course we weren't. But I definitely did give into some lifestyle creep. I definitely allowed myself to say, hey, you know what? Let's go out to eat tonight. And when you get to doing that 3-4 times a week, boy, it sure adds up. Another thing we did is I was working for the government. I was working for the state of Utah, and I thought, oh gosh, I'm really not making a lot of money here. What I didn't realize is I had fantastic insurance. And generally speaking, when you work for the government, you do have really good insurance. And in my case, a pension, by the way, which is also pretty sweet. So I left and I went to a private employer, and it was great. I enjoyed the job. I did make more money, but unfortunately, I had to now pay for my insurance plan. And the insurance plan cost $1,000 a month. And so kind of in that $1,000 in insurance, my raise was almost wiped out. The additional amount of money that I was getting had almost completely been wiped out because of the amount of money that I was having to pay for insurance. And on top of that, it wasn't great insurance. And I've had some medical stuff come up. So unfortunately, in the year and a half, 2 years since we last recorded, we've taken some steps forward, but we've also kind of had some moments where we did in fact take some steps back. So we've made some progress, but we've also had some hiccups.
Yeah, and I appreciate you being so open about it, because I think it's really important, and that's one of the reasons also why we're doing this household series. Is life is not just straight up and to the right and everything going rosy all the time. That's unrealistic, and certainly FI is not that. I mean, even Laura and I still succumb to lifestyle creep every now and again. It's kind of the way that I've found like this whole cycle works. Like I just realized, and this was just my own stupidity, and it's only $10 a month, but like I've been paying for Paramount Plus for the last 6 months since or the last 4 months since Survivor, the last episode of Survivor ended like in May or something. And because the next season just started, I went to re-up my account and started over, and I saw, oh, interesting, it's still there. And stupid me has been paying it for months, right? And like that's a tiny little example. And obviously nobody's getting wealthy on $10 a month, and I'm not trying to argue otherwise. But I think that stuff happens. We take our eye off the ball. And like you said, life is lumpy, right? And I think that the sooner we all realize that, the sooner we realize perfection is not the goal here. It simply isn't. What the goal is to me is just being directionally accurate, taking action to make your life better, understanding that life's going to get in the way sometimes. And frankly, like when you first started saying, hey, we go out to eat, and then you said 3 or 4 times a week, right? Like going out to eat, like if you were making an extra $12,000, $15,000 a year, going out to eat a couple extra times a month is really no big deal. Like in the cosmic scheme of things, obviously going out to eat 12 or 15 times a month, that's probably going to eat up a good portion of that additional money. So I think there's always some happy medium there. And yeah, I think just the biggest thing is to just not beat yourself up about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And also thank you for sharing, because, Brad Barrett's a real guy. He makes mistakes just like the rest of us.
All the time.
It's good to know that we're all kind of on a level playing field, and we're all just trying to figure it out. Now, like you said, $10 a month, that's not terrible, but it's just like the, $30 a month I'm spending to take the family to get burgers. Not a super big deal, but it definitely adds up when you're doing it, quite a bit. So what I ended up doing is I did end up, for insurance sake, going back to state of Utah employment. So I am back with the government and getting kind of back on track with contributing to all my different accounts and getting my savings back where I want it to be. And the thing about it is, I feel like I got to add that those trips to, the burger joint or Chili's or Applebee's, wherever I was going, didn't necessarily add value to my life. It wasn't this thing, oh gosh, I just wish I could eat out 3 to 4 times a week. We can have just as good a time, if not a better time, going to the store and buying some steaks and getting out on the grill and eating at home and, spending less than half the money.
Yeah. And that is really important, right? The intentionality of spending. Because again, this is not the deprivation community. It isn't. That's not how we roll at Choose a Vi. But I think it is easy to sleepwalk sometimes, right? And there is a way to be intentional about it. And like you said, like you could go out and buy fantastic gourmet steaks if you wanted to. Go out and buy filet mignon. It's going to be cheaper in all likelihood than those burgers, certainly multiple times a week. And you're going to feel pretty damn good about yourself. Like what we've done, as silly as this sounds, like we like watching Gordon Ramsay, some of his shows. So like we YouTube how Gordon Ramsay cooks a filet mignon or cooks this or cooks that. And we make it, my daughter likes cooking. She's in some kind of little young chef's class, and she digs that. So like we're cooking like Gordon Ramsay at home for a tiny little fraction of the price. And again, it's these little things that like, okay, what am I looking to get out of the situation? And I think sometimes it's the time with family. which is hard to carve out unless we say, oh, let's hop in the car, we're going to go to the burger joint. But if you're intentional about it, you could make cooking at home something that's family time. So I think the real key is that intentionality.
And not only that, just to kind of piggyback off what you're saying, Brad, is I don't know, I'm sure your kids do this. I think everybody's kids do this, is say, hey, can I help? Can I help with this? And sometimes when we're really busy and, we're trying to make dinner and the kids say, hey, can I help? It's a little bit like, oh, no, I will get this done way faster if you don't help. But you could take that moment as kind of just this parenting moment and say, you know what, I've got a little bit of time right now. Yeah, you can help season the steak or help, do this or that or move this, just little things to where they can feel like, hey, I remember cooking with my dad. I remember cooking with my mom. And by the way, if you had gone to, one of Gordon Ramsay's actual restaurants, which we're not too far from Las Vegas where we are here in Southern Utah, he's got a couple restaurants out there. It would cost much more than the cost of a couple of steaks at the grocery store. Yeah, that's looking at a $300 bill on that dinner.
Yeah, seriously. And yeah, I liked how you said, sometimes the kids just want to be involved, and also really empowering them and emboldening them, I think is important also. Like my daughter, again, she loves to make scrambled eggs, and her scrambled eggs are fantastic. Like she's the best chef in the house by far. So I actually asked her the other day, I'm like, hey, Molly, I would love to have more eggs in my life. Could you make me scrambled eggs twice a week in the morning? Because I'm just eating like a protein bar and I don't, it's not that great. So she was thrilled. She gets to cook for dad. It's just this awesome thing. So yeah, sometimes it's just little things like that. But I do not want to gloss over really the huge aspect you said there of the job, leaving, coming back, the insurance, and actually kind of looking at, I guess, a compensation package in totality, right? Because I think a lot of us sometimes get those dollar signs in our eyes, right? The Scrooge McDuck dollar signs, like you said before. And, oh, wow, this is $15,000 a year more in gross salary. And that sounds like an absolute slam dunk, right? Like by definition, that has to be a slam dunk. But then in your case, the health insurance, which is subpar as compared to the prior one, that premium wiped out essentially all of your raise. So you're now making the same amount net for having worse health insurance and no pension. So it's interesting. And obviously you have since gone back to the state, which is cool. And I want to hear about that. But talk me through that decision to leave, because I'm curious how much of it was the dollar signs, how much of it was potential future income, because I assume income at the state is maybe limited with raises and such. I don't know if that's a bad assumption, but talk me through like the inception of that idea to leave.
To leave the first time or to go back?
To leave the first time.
So leaving the first time, I felt like was a pretty easy decision. I'm a therapist in mental health, and I work in a correctional facility doing mental health, which right there off the bat, I think would rule out a lot of people. A lot of people say, I have zero desire to be a mental health clinician in a correctional facility. That sounds terrible, which for me personally, it's awesome. I love that job. But yeah, it can, you can have some hard days where some wild and crazy things can happen. And so, hey, this is pretty stressful. Okay. And on top of that, like you mentioned, working for the state, they're not going to pay top dollar. They're not going to pay what, the highest paid therapist is making. And so, yeah, a lot of folks do say, okay, I'm going to go check out the private sector. And I've got some friends. It's actually the job I went to go work was a wilderness therapy job where actually you go out and you do treatment with, teenage kids out in the outdoors, which I'm a big believer. Yeah. I love the outdoors. I got my undergraduate degree in outdoor recreation. So I thought, hey, this is going to be great.
That's perfect.
And it was a fantastic job. I really enjoyed those guys. I really enjoyed working with those kids out there. But one of the questions that I just had never thought to ask, it had always just kind of been handed to me, is, hey, what's the benefits package look like? And that to me feels like kind of like an adult question. And as a mid to late 30s adult, I'm just arriving at the party of asking these adult questions. But yeah, I just didn't consider, hey, I've got really good health insurance working for the state, and that insurance is, ballpark worth, $25,000 potentially compared to this insurance that's kind of, most people have a 20/80 insurance plan where they pay most of the bill and the insurance covers about 20%. Or at least that's the plan I got when I went to work in the private sector. Whereas when I work for the state, it's the opposite. It's 80-20, where the insurance covers 80% of everything. And then you, as the person using the insurance, pay the 20. And for me, I also have an HSA plan as a government employee. So the HSA plan actually just covers the other 20%. So now whenever I go to the doctor, I pay $0 as a state employee. And whenever I was over working in the private sector, it was the bills were actually kind of there's a handful of bills. It's not a ton of money, but we're trying to pay it all off with our HSA. So there's no taxes involved. But yeah, there's still a couple $100 outstanding on the health bills that I accrued while away from my state of Utah employment.
Yeah, I hear you. And I think like you're kind of joking / self-deprecating about asking the adult question. But I think what we kind of realize, and what we certainly realize here, is that none of us have this information. There's no like secret well of knowledge other than sharing it, like on a podcast like this, or us knowing to even ask the questions. Because I don't think there's any like adults in the room that just know this by definition. So like certainly don't beat yourself up. But I think that is a huge takeaway for the audience is look at your entire compensation package and ask those questions, especially if you know you're at a company where you're leaving a company that either is a government, which almost by definition is going to have better benefits. And I do want to talk about that in a second because there's two components of that. But if it's like a legacy company as well, like an old school, I'm thinking, and I have no insider knowledge, but I'm thinking like the GEs, GMs of the world, like I suspect strongly that some of those older style companies are going to have more lucrative health insurance policies for the employee than, let's say, a startup or a wilderness therapy company or whatever it may be. Like just by virtue of, like you said, Zach, I mean, it costs for a policy costs somewhere between $15,000 to $25,000 for a family for one insurance policy. And that money needs to get paid by somebody, right? So if that's being paid by the company entirely, that's $25,000 they're covering for you. There's no magic here. Sure, there's some for bigger companies, they self-insure and yada. So for the experts listening to this, I understand there's more nuance to this, but realistically, for a small company, somebody has to pay the bill, right? So it's either you or them or some combination thereof. So, and I did want to dial in just real quick, because again, this is like huge for the audience, is there are the premiums. So the actual premiums you pay just to have the insurance policy. And that's usually split in some manner by you and your employer. And then there's the details of the actual policy. And it sounds like in your case, so that might be, like you said, okay, we cover 80% of it. You know, there's all these nuances, right? There's the co-insurance, the deductible, all this stuff. But it sounds as if your policy at the company you had went to for a short period of time was kind of a double whammy in the sense that you had to pay a significant amount of premiums. And then the actual policy didn't cover all that much. So you had to pay a lot out of pocket. Is that roughly accurate?
I appreciate the clarification because yes, it definitely was. And no disrespect to those guys. I enjoyed working with them and everything like that. But as a smaller company, it's kind of difficult to say, okay, we're going to pay you this amount of money and we're also going to provide this Cadillac of an insurance plan, which that's what I get at the state of Utah. And I never realized that my insurance plan was a Cadillac. But yeah, I had to pay for the actual plan itself, and then it didn't end up being a Cadillac of a plan.
Right. And yeah, absolutely no disrespect to those guys. And I mean, that's what we do at ChooseFI. Like, because we have a corporate structure, we can technically get health insurance through it. And it's actually not that much cheaper. Certainly, it's no cheaper for me to do that than to just go on the ACA and get a policy. But because I'm able to get like an HSA plan and then contribute money to an HSA, but not exhaust it and just have let that compound over years and decades, it's kind of nets to the positive for me to go through that. But same as you, like when you were with those guys, I pay a ridiculous premium every month and our insurance covers basically nothing. So it's more or less like hit by a bus insurance. That's essentially what it is.
And that's what it is. If a catastrophic thing happened, it would have covered me. But anything else, just regular doctor visits, you're mostly going to be paying out of pocket.
Yeah. So I think just kind of last word is when you're thinking about employment, like really consider the entirety of it. And, you know, this is to the audience, right? Like consider your 401k, your 401k match, those kind of things? Is there a pension? Are there differences in the number of weeks off you get? Like this all counts. It's not just that one eye-popping number of this is my salary and that's it. So I think that's like a huge takeaway. Hey, this is Brad. I wanted to let you know we're changing things up a little bit. I'm going away for the foreseeable future from traditional advertising, and we're actually going to partner with some of my favorite podcasts to cross-promote our shows. So they tell their audience about Choosify, and I tell you, our community, about, again, some of my favorite shows. So it works out beautifully. So give them a try. Hit subscribe, check them out, and let me know what you think. I listen to a lot of podcasts. The Tim Ferriss Show has always been my favorite by far, but for the first time ever, there's a real rival for that top spot. It's a show called My First Million. When I see a new episode show up in my podcast player, it's a drop everything and listen kind of situation for me. The show is all about business building and growth hacking, from how to make $1,000 in a weekend type side hustles to billion-dollar ideas and everything in between. The show is fun, it's infectious. The hosts, Sam Parr and Sean Perry, have an amazing rapport. In fact, if you're a longtime Choosify fan, I think you'll find it's the closest thing to me and Jonathan you've ever heard. And Sam and Sean are legit. They've built and sold 8-figure businesses to HubSpot and Amazon, and they have an amazing network of friends and colleagues they get on the show to share their wisdom. If I lost everything and had to start over from scratch, I can honestly say the first place I'd start is with My First Million. I think the mindset of business building they cultivate is unmatched, so I'd seriously just listen to every episode in their feed and go from there. The show is a little bit of an acquired taste, but as you get to know Sam and Sean, you'll see just how brilliant they are. So take my word for it and listen to at least a handful of episodes. I think you'll love it. So search for My First Million. That's My First Million on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
So if I may change gears just a little bit, one of the things we realized, if I'm going to go back to work for the state of Utah, where I don't, make, mind-blowing amounts of money, I got to figure out a way to bring in a little bit more. And we're comfortable, we're living a life we really enjoy, and we totally are happy with our income. But if we want to reach financial independence, if we brought in a few extra dollars, that would really help us along our way. So the thing we began exploring was, okay, how do we get some different streams of income? Because we already had one that we were really excited about, which was that house hack. So, wow, this brings in over $1,000 a month. What else can we do? And so we've got a couple of things that we're working on, and Marilyn and I sit down once a month and try to kind of have a financial meeting and plan out our future. And we've got some hefty goals. I'd really like to reach 5 by the time I'm 43, and I'm 37 right now. So that's only 6 years away. We've got a net worth hanging out around $100,000, which we're pretty stoked about. There's a lot of folks out there, my parents included, who haven't really saved for the future. And the plan is I'm just going to keep working until I can't work anymore. That's the last thing we wanted for ourselves. So one of the things we looked into was we had some friends who have an Amazon store. And we actually partnered with a company that hires virtual assistants to help you run your Amazon store. So the idea of it is that you don't have to do anything. It's completely hands-off. Once you kind of set it all up, all the virtual assistants kind of run everything. And that's really new. I mean, it's kind of been some pocket change right now. There's just to set it up, we had to pay a little bit of money. So that's kind of a we'll see. I don't know exactly where that's going to land, but I'm excited in the future to kind of update you guys on where we're at with that. But that's definitely something that we've seen other people be able to be successful about multiple times over. And so we decided to jump in and see what we could do in that space.
Yeah, that's cool. I love the entrepreneurial bug. And I don't know specifically. So that Amazon thing, is that like the fulfillment by Amazon, where in essence you're like sourcing products and then selling them for a higher price and netting the difference? Or is it something else entirely?
That's exactly what it is. So we're kind of partnered with the company that helps us out with it. But yeah, they go to different producers of products and try to get them into the market in different ways. Amazon's one of the ways. And also this company that we're partnered with, they're looking at multiple places to be suppliers of. That's still kind of in the works right now, but there are some talks, connecting with Walmart Plus, getting going with, like Home Depot, like all these places have stores that can be supplied in different ways. I think there's a lot there. And unfortunately, I am brand new at it. So I don't know a ton just yet, but I'm excited with where it could potentially go.
So now in that description, so this is something I've looked into before, and I've heard people talk about this on Nick Loper's Side Hustle Nation, Side Hustle Show, and it always intrigued me, and it especially intrigued my wife Laura because she considers herself like a Uber shopper basically, and there's a lot of really interesting, I guess, pieces of software and apps that you can download for that, but she like never could crack the code of sourcing the products. But it sounds as if you're partnering, in this case, partnering with a company that already has products, or am I totally mishearing that?
No, so the company that we're partnered with, they are doing kind of the lion's share of the work to build these relationships with folks who are in factories making widgets, if you will. And we take those widgets and we say, okay, we'll be the middleman here and we'll find places that can sell said widgets.
Yeah. Okay. So, because my skeptical nature always comes up with some things like in this case, what value add are you providing for this company? Like what's to say they don't just cut you out of the loop, or are you doing some aspect or putting money in or some such?
Yeah. So that's the kind of the thing where life is lumpy. We invested, a couple $1,000s into the process to essentially fund this venture. So we do get involved a little bit. We got our money management thing with all the money that's going in and out of the Amazon store. We have our own Amazon store that's currently open. So we do a little bit of the management, and then we also kind of bought into the idea of it.
Okay, cool. I got you. So yeah, again, my like just skeptical, like if you're seeing that it's working and you're good to go, then there's no world where this company is going to call you up and say, oh, Zach, we need $10,000 for inventory, and they run away with it, right?
Yeah, no, it's a type of situation. I mean, we've already put in the money that we're going to put in. That part of it is done. And now we're starting to see things go up in our store and get sold. And like I said, it's still early stages, so we'll see where it goes. Hopefully it's not a thing where we come back and say, hey, they ran away with the money.
No, and I don't suspect that's the case. But that's what's cool is because you guys do have this space and you have a little extra income, obviously, and money saved up, you can look at alternate paths to earn more money. And then there are plenty of them. Like I know we had somebody talk about, I think they sent a voicemail in. I know I talked about this on my bi-weekly newsletter, but like they were a mobile notary and they make a couple $1,000s a month. Like that was a neat thing. I just referenced Nick Loper. He has a book, $1,000, 100 Ways. And just a really good book. It's kind of like just makes you think in terms of, here's at least expanding the universe of things that I could possibly do as a side hustle. I know one of my favorite podcasts is called My First Million, which is like the worst name in the world. And they kind of make fun of the name of their own podcast, but it's like just kind of like a business, like business hacks and like business incubation. And it's just like a cool, if you want to just brainstorm and like just have your brain kind of work on some stuff, like that's a pretty cool one to listen to as well. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely, there's lots of different options. And I love that you guys actually jumped in and did it, because I think most people get bogged down in the actually implementing it. So definitely want to hear how that goes. It sounds like it is at the absolute infancy, right?
Yeah, it's brand new. And I love that as a segue because, there is a lot of things out there. There's a lot of potential ways. I'm hearing about all these different things from somebody created this new product to the kid down the street who will, earn $10 to mow my lawn. Like there's all these different ways to earn side income. So for me, probably even more exciting than the e-commerce store is I'm a therapist and I can take clients on the side. It's not unreasonable for me to ask, about $100 a client. So with that $100 a client, that usually takes me about an hour, maybe a little more if I've got to do some paperwork afterwards. I could potentially, for 5 to 10 hours a week worth of private clients, replace my income. And so, I've got a great opportunity working for the state of Utah. I've got access to a pension. I've got access to a 457, 401k, a Roth IRA. I've got all that stuff. And they do a pretty good job managing it. So my goal is, I'm not there yet, but my goal, I hope actually by the next time we talk, I'm going to take 100% of my income and put it into those different accounts. The health savings plan is our top priority. So the first thing we do when we're putting money away is to max that thing out. I think it's like $7,000 a year or something for a family. And then we go to fill up the Roth IRA and fill up the 457. And hopefully we can kind of max out all of these accounts while living off of the money I make in my private practice. So again, that's in the early stages. I'm only doing 1 to 3 hours a week on that. And so I create $100 to $300 of additional income per week. So, you add that up over a month, and it only takes a handful of clients to replace my $40,000 to $50,000 income.
Wow, that is amazing. Yeah, we've heard this is not a negative thing. We've actually heard people talk about like really the superpower of starting with a low income, right? Because you're already, and it sounds kind of counterintuitive, but like you're already rocking this, right? Like you're already on the path to a significantly abbreviated path to FI as it is on a $40,000 to $50,000 a year salary. And now you're looking at all these additional ways to earn income. So it's you really can supercharge it incredibly quickly. So when you said before you're 37, you want 6 years to FI, like have you run the numbers on, okay, if I save 100% of my income, and again, the beautiful thing of that is your tax liability is going to be, I mean, if not zero, pretty darn close to it, right? Like even with all this side income, because if you were putting all of your income into these pre-tax buckets, then that's essentially wiping that down to zero on your regular income. And then you have your side income, but you still get certainly the standard deduction, right? And you get child tax credits, and you have 2 kids. So there's a real high likelihood that your tax liability is going to be a big fat zero, which is remarkable.
Yeah, I remember that. I think there's an early episode, like episode 4 of Choose a FI, you guys had on the Millionaire Educator, and he talks about putting all his money into a 457 account for a couple of years, and then living off the 457 account for a couple of years while contributing everything he makes. So that one like lit me up. I thought, oh, I have access to the 457. I am going to do this one. And up until this point, I haven't really been able. It's been tough to tuck away that much money. But now that I'm licensed as a therapist, it kind of opens the window to be able to take advantage of that way of doing things.
That is really awesome. Yeah, that was you were super close. That was episode 13, which is the unfair FI advantage of teachers. And yeah, with the Millionaire Educator. And yeah, it's just cool. Like that's one of those superpowers of people in the public sector. And again, usually there's that narrative of firefighters and police and teachers, et cetera, can't possibly get ahead. And I understand clearly, I think in many cases, those incredibly important jobs, they are underpaid, but there are some of these nice benefits as well, which can help supercharge if you know about it, right? And again, that's if you know about this can be a remarkable thing. So Zach, talk to me about that 6-year path to FI. What did you mock up when you figured that out, like in terms of side income and things like that?
Okay, so we're a little unconventional.
Nothing wrong with that, my friend. Nothing wrong with that.
Being used to frugal living and being used to living off just $30,000 a year, if you take that and you multiply it by 25, I think the number is somewhere around $700,000. That being said, I would still consider myself financially independent. With the number that Marilyn and I have set on our FI number is $500,000. Okay. And the reason for that probably seems low for most people. For most people, I'd say it's up around $1 million or more, but depending on their lifestyle. But for us, we're really comfortable living on $30,000 a month. And also, I'm going to continue. I don't even consider it work. It's a lot of fun for me to do some private clients. So if I'm taking 5 private clients in a week, so essentially I'm only working 5 hours a week, that adds up to $2,000 a month, give or take. So I am perfectly willing in my FI life to work 5 hours a week. 5 hours a week is nothing. So with that, $500,000 a year plus the $2,000 a month that we would get from my income with a little bit of side work, doing some individual therapy, we would be more than comfortable. And so that $500,000 number, if I take my $40,000 to $50,000 a year income, put 100% of that in retirement accounts, we would be hanging out right around probably a little more, probably close to $600,000 by the time I'm 43. So 6 years from now, 37 to 43. And pull the trigger on financial independence, be able to hang up the job.
That is awesome. I mean, that is remarkable. 6 years. So it would be, 8 or 9 years since you found the concept of FI. And like you said, again, like FI does not have to be, and I think this is so important that people understand this, like it does not have to be, okay, I've reached this fat FI number and I'm never going to work ever again. And that's that. Like you, as you've described, you love your job, right? That adds value to your life and to the world and to the people you're working with. So if you're talking 5 hours a week, right? Like to be at a point where at 43 years old, you can hang up your 9 to 5 job. I mean, that seems like a no-brainer to me. And I guess as you've described, right, that would be $24,000 a year. If you had the $500,000 or $600,000 net worth, you theoretically could pull 20 to 24,000 from that. So you're at a point where even with the 5 hours a week, you're probably still going to save some money, which is insane when you really think about it.
Yeah, I always hear people, I listen to a bunch of different podcasts on this stuff, and I hear folks, oh yeah, I was getting so saving up and I didn't want to pull the trigger and I was so nervous. I think Big Earn is like one of the ones who's always calculating his safe withdrawal rate and all that stuff. And generally speaking, my experience in talking to folks is they die with a bunch of money in their pockets still. They have so much saved, they end up with more than they actually needed. And that we want to be in that camp too. But we also want to be able to pull the trigger and not be afraid to jump off and finally quit that 9 to 5.
Yeah, we actually have an episode with Nick Majuli coming out later this month. And yeah, he talked about the exact same thing, which is so many people are just so conservative when it comes to the number when there's a real high likelihood. And again, nobody can be certain of anything, right? There could be always be the zombie apocalypse, but you can't account for that. But looking at real numbers, there's a much higher likelihood that most of us are going to end up with multiples of the net worth that we started with when we reach 5, then certainly even going below that number, not less exhausting it, which is what we're all deathly afraid of, right? Like we're all worried about running out of money, but I think that's just so silly, right? Like we're adaptable creatures, we're adaptable, intelligent beings. And to imagine that we're going to just blindly let this money exhaust itself, it's just like, it's so silly to even like think about that as a possibility, right?
And one of the things Marilyn and I have this thing where we try to push ourselves to get in uncomfortable situations because that's where growth happens, and ask ourselves whenever we get excited about something, for example, this e-commerce store that frankly is a little bit scary. It's something we've never done before, but we say to ourselves, okay, what's stopping us from doing this? If I wasn't afraid, what would I do? And so if we can check our fears just a little bit and say, okay, let's look at the statistics, that it's replicable potentially. We can look at other examples and kind of calm those fears or take them away. And yeah, it's hard to completely remove all fear, but we don't want to keep ourselves from living just because, whatever might happen. Like you said, you can't account for the zombie apocalypse. Like there are things we just don't know that could happen, and that shouldn't keep us from, trying things and just kind of seeing where we land.
Yeah. Zach, that quote, if I wasn't afraid, what would I do? I mean, goodness, that's like one of those chill-inducing things, right? Like how many of us do I'm certainly included in this group. Like how many of us let our fear overwhelm us sometimes? I think it's a lot. It's easy to spin a tale of everything that could go wrong. Even like with your Amazon store, frankly, like if that doesn't succeed, like what's the downside? Maybe a couple $1,000s, it sounds like, but you learned a lot of lessons and you picked up a lot of skills. And I think about that in terms of a bunch of like the websites that I owned over the last, I mean, it's more than a decade now. It's like probably almost 15 years. Some of these crazy websites like just failed spectacularly. Like I did everything wrong. I mean, honestly, Zach, I did everything wrong over a 5-year period. Like I did like spammy kind of like gray hat SEO keyword stuffing nonsense that like it's hard for me to believe that I did that now, like looking back, that I was like that inauthentic. It really is hard to believe. I had a firewood storage rack website that like I put a ton of time into, and again did some of that kind of gray or black hat SEO stuff and just got decimated. But I learned a heck of a lot in every single one of those failed projects, like a heck of a lot. And Richmond Savers would have never existed if not for that. Travel Miles 101 certainly would have never existed. And obviously, by definition, Choose FI would not have existed if I didn't just get started, right? Like get started on that path. So do I look back and wish that I was like an overnight success in 2009? I mean, yeah, obviously, but like, I think it's turned out okay. And I think one of the biggest things is just sticking with it and understanding that frankly, failure is part of life. It just is. And if you think you're going to be an overnight success because you know everything, like, you're probably not going to have the greatest life if you have that mindset.
Yeah. If you've never played darts, it's pretty tough to hit the bullseye on the first try, right? You're going to need to take a couple practice throws and see what happens. But on your wood storage racks, you've mentioned that before. And we read the 4-Hour Work Week. Tim Ferriss talks about drop shipping in the 4-Hour Work Week. And actually, as we were looking to open our e-commerce store, that's what we were looking into was, okay, that, for those who don't know, the idea of drop shipping is just you take a product that somebody else makes and you're just almost this unnecessary middleman, and you post the product for sale on a website or something. And when people order it from you, you don't hold on to any inventory. When people order it from you, you then order it from that company that creates it and have it shipped to the person who bought it from you. So
that's exactly it. And that literally, Zach, is exactly what I did. So yeah, I wound up, we bought, it was me and a buddy of mine who had like another ink cartridge website actually that he did rather well with. But I think we bought that website for $512 off of a website called Flippa, which I think is not Flippa anymore, but it probably redirects to whatever the new marketplace is. And we kind of figured we could spruce it up. And they actually already had the bones of the website. They had all the products in there. This was back in like the Stone Ages. So like now I think you can use Shopify and things like that. But like this was actually, I remember having to use like getting a credit card interface set up with something called authorize.net. And like, we had this kind of back end of our website. But yeah, I mean, in terms of elegant business models, if you can figure out drop shipping, it is the single most elegant business model I've ever seen in my entire life. Like literally, as you described it, somebody would come to our website, which was largely an unnecessary middleman, which is exactly how I would have described it if I was as eloquent as you. And people would come, they would buy it from us, even though it was a Woodhaven storage rack or whatever. And like they could have bought it from the company, and they paid their money with their credit card. I literally got an email that this order came in. I forwarded the email. I have already collected the money. I pay them through a credit card 30 days later, and I just net the difference. So in that case, there was no exposure at all because the money was already sitting in my account. They paid me when they checked out, but I didn't have to pay for the actual item for another 30 or so days. And I didn't do a thing. I mean, Zach, I literally forwarded an email. That's it. And I would make 30 or 40% of the gross sales price. It was wild. I mean, if you can actually value add, which we're kind of joking about the unnecessary middleman, but in this case, what is Amazon? But as we're kind of jokingly saying, an unnecessary middleman. They're not unnecessary at all. Like they are where people go. So if you have additional skills and can get ranked in Google for particular keywords or products, et cetera, I mean, you can be a real benefit to that manufacturing company, right? Like they're selling it at their wholesale price, probably like they would sell it to Amazon or whoever. And so they don't care that it's going to you. They're shipping it out like they would anyway. So it's no skin off their back. If you can get them additional sales, it's gravy to everybody. So yeah, I don't know in 2022, the state of the drop shipping world, but like for somebody who has some skills with ranking in search engines and such, like that can be a really cool industry.
And it just goes back to what we were talking about earlier with there's a whole world of things out there that you could potentially do. When I read 4-Hour Work Week and I heard about drop shipping, my mind, I think, exploded because there's a potential income stream that I can have for myself with really not doing a whole lot. And that was really exciting to me. So we've kind of explored that a little bit, and we ended up landing on an e-commerce store. But I've left you guys with a lot of we'll sees today. So.
Yeah, well, I mean, listen, that's how it works, and I think it's not always, like you said, life is lumpy. And I mean, it sounds like even your like quote unquote setbacks are not really that bad. It's just like readjustment and realignment, right? So like, okay, we're spending a little bit extra. Well, now we can be intentional. And I think this is another thing you mentioned to me offline is you guys have really focused on mindset and being intentional and having a growth mindset. And maybe we could talk about this now, or maybe this is like a whole nother episode next time. But I think part of life and figuring all this stuff out is just being open to exploring. That's like how I think about it. And that makes it fun for me. So again, like I don't look back at like soccertools.com, which was like a website that I had where I was literally in like 2011, like hard coding, like in HTML, the English Premier League soccer tables. Like I was a crazy person. And like, I mean, that was a total waste of time. But again, was it? right? Because I still have rudimentary HTML skills that I still use today, like in WordPress. They're minimal, but like I learned something. And that is cool. And I think exploring and understanding that, okay, look, the first couple of things may not work, but I'm going to pick up skills and I'm going to pick myself up and I'm going to move on to the next thing. And I'm going to be open-minded. And I'm going to take in information, right? Far and wide. I think like that's something that I do, which is just try to find various sources of information that can just help educate me, but in a fun way. Like, again, I do it through podcasts and things like that mostly. But when your brain makes these connections and you read 4 Hour Work Week and you listen to Ferris and you listen to our show and, read Nick Loper's book, et cetera, like you're going to put things together and you're going to be more open to the serendipity of maybe getting a little bit lucky sometimes.
And that's where we're at right now is we're in the process of taking these ideas and kind of these, not philosophies because there's more action to them, but getting to work really and seeing what lands. I think Mark Cuban once said, if there has to be a luckiest guy in the world, it may as well be me. Same thing. He started broadcast.com, and from there just things landed and things worked for him. And now he's one of the wealthiest guys out there. But that's the growth mindset. That's this idea that we can have more. I grew up in, lower income home and I am really good at being frugal. I can live on, to the chagrin of my wife, I can live on almost nothing. In college, I think I literally like went a month where all I had in the pantry was like a bag of rice and I was able to get by that way. And so I tend to, I'm lucky to have Marilyn in my life because I tend to say, okay, let's just keep cutting back. Let's cut back more. Let's cut back more. And this is how we're going to increase our savings rate. It's just by cutting back more. And cutting back more is fantastic. Cutting back is a great way to kind of get your finances in line. But there's a flip side of that coin. You can absolutely go too far. And left to my own devices, I probably would go too far. My wife's fantastic and she helps balance me because the flip side of that is we can also grow more. We can also make more money. We can bring more in. And the world is open to us. And I tend to get in this mindset of, okay, I make $40,000 to $50,000 a year. That's the number I've got to work with. And it just isn't. There's other opportunities out there. W-2 income is not the only thing out there. And I think that when I really realized that, truly, that started us on our path to FI.
Yeah, that's great. As Jonathan used to like to say, you can only frugalize so much. There's only so much you can go down that path until you reach that brick wall of, oh, I don't like my life anymore. This is not fun. And I think that's why it's so important that you have some balance, right, with Marilyn. And then that's huge. So, I mean, that's awesome. I know you kind of like jokingly said like, okay, I left you with a lot of we're going to do's kind of thing. But I mean, Zach, that's great. That again, that's what this series is for. And I'm so glad that you came back and joined us. And sorry again that it's been 18 months since we've last checked in, but it sounds like you guys are doing great, even amidst understanding that life is lumpy sometimes, right? And that's perfectly fine. Believe me, we've all been there. We really have. And I think that's super important. The audience hears that. It's like, there's nobody I know that has just had this simple, easy path to financial independence. It doesn't is it directionally accurate? Is your life getting better week after week, month after month? Yeah, I mean, it is. But does that mean that every day is perfect and unicorns and rainbows? No, I mean, never. That's not how my lived experience works. So I think this is really critically important. And I can't wait to hear back from you guys. We'll touch base certainly in a couple months and see what's going on with the side hustles and just kind of go from there.
Sounds great. We're excited to report back, hopefully with just mind-blowingly good numbers. We're financially independent 3 months from now. Unlikely, but still, we're excited to report back.
One Amazon store at a time. You never know. That's the cool thing.
That's right.
So excited to have Marilyn back on the show next time. And yeah, Zach, thank you so much for joining us.